Welcome to the Return to Roots Mill to Vet podcast, your guide through the journey from military to veterans in the community. This podcast is dedicated to service members, veterans, and their families. Get ready for inspirational stories and experiences generously shared by our amazing guests. Stand by for the sound of freedom. Before we dive into today's episode, we want to remind you of two essential resources, the 988 National Hotline for Mental Health Support and the MYTT 365 app available at milltovet.com. Both are valuable tools to assist you in your transition journey. Now let's get to the show.
Network provider, so you can go wherever.
Perfect. So let's start with, Katherine, thank you for joining us. We appreciate everything that you do for the veteran community, everything that you have done, and everything you keep on doing, especially bringing the mental health and mental awareness to not just active duty, but also to the veterans and your entire network. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm just honored to be here and join everyone. I appreciate your podcast bringing attention to a variety of issues that impacts our community, and to be a part of the conversation is just an honor and a privilege. So thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's really awesome just to have you on here. I was kind of going through your LinkedIn profile a little bit, and it seems like you definitely are like kicking some serious ass out there. And you know, one of the things is like, when you're in, you're like, what am I going to do? Crap. What am I going to do? It's so scary, man. So, to see you out there just kicking ass and doing, what happened just recently? You were just awarded an award recently. What was that all about?
So, earlier this year, I was actually appointed by the governor of Virginia to join the Joint Leadership Council Veteran Service Organization, which is an advisory council to the governor as it pertains to issues that impact veterans as well as their families. I am the youngest council member on this, and so it's very exciting. I get to serve a term. I had to swear in and everything all over again, so it's just an honor and privilege. But back in January 2022, I was awarded Student Veteran of the Year, which was an amazing opportunity given to me by Student Veterans of America, where I got to represent 765,000 student veterans across the country. And it's a humbling experience because at the time I felt I was at the lowest point of my life, but was doing what I was doing because I love what I do. And for it to mean as much to me as it meant to others is just a heartwarming feeling, and a feeling that is irreplaceable. But also I tell myself over and over again, I don't deserve it, but I did what I could with the platform, which is to continue bringing attention to issues I'm passionate about.
So,
Hey, sorry. Hey, Nuccio, you got the opening salvo, brother.
All right. Just standard intro, man. Freaking how I like to introduce my people.
No, the questions, man. You got the first salvo on the questions.
First one. All right. Oh, Mark's gonna have fun editing this one. Hey, Kat. So, how do veterans get hold of you? What's the best way to get hold of Katherine Martinez?
Best way to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn. I check it at least once or twice a day, in the morning or in the evening. If I don't get to your message right away, I promise I will. It is a public account, so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
now with that, Katherine, can you give us two, I'm going to ask you two questions, right? They're both the same thing, just in different timelines. Before you joined the Navy, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself and give yourself some advice, what advice would that be?
I should have joined the Navy sooner. That would be my first piece of advice. I joined when I was 20. I was in the Navy Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps in high school. So, you know, you would expect those cadets to join the military right after graduation. I did not. That recruiter tried his best to get me, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. And, right when I turned 18, I had gotten married at the time and started going to college. I was a business administration major. And, as time went on, they're like, you got to take another accounting class. I was like, that's not for me. And with other personal components that were adding up, I was just like, what can I do? And found solace in joining the Navy because it was familiar to me. I had worn the uniform before. I had my senior naval science instructor's advice at the time. And, once my final semester had closed, I didn't graduate with my business administration degree. I left it to join the Navy. I felt like I was making the right choice. So I'd probably tell my younger self to join sooner because the Navy gave me so much, from family to the strength and courage to pursue a lot of what I'm doing now.
Interesting. And now I know you went, and we'll talk about the med board process, right? But normally the question would be, what advice would you give yourself before you get out and ask the transition process, right? But with the taking into account that you went through the med board, would you give yourself some kind of advice prior or during your military career to prepare yourself for what would eventually happen?
Yes. So all of my time in the Navy, from when I first got on board my ship or was in A school or my MLS school for other branches, they tell you all the time, know your instructions, know the procedures, know the policies. And, usually you're just like, oh, you're just talking about uniform, it's the hands in the pockets thing, it's wearing sunglasses, things that seem so minuscule, and you do look up the instructions for certain things and you go on and keep it in your pocket just in case, or you're ready for that person to call you out on something. You're like, I got the instruction ready. But I would tell myself to look beyond those things that, seem kind of silly and mundane to us and look really more on our quality of life. I did not know how much went into a medical board process, let alone being put in a limited duty status. Had I been aware of these instructions, I might actually still be in the Navy, since I actually went into limited duty status without an official diagnosis. I was given idiopathic condition as my reason to go LIMDU, but that just means of unknown causes. Something's wrong of unknown causes, but by instruction, you need to be given a diagnosis that can be worked and treated on. So I would give myself the advice to know a little bit more about the things that are going to impact you, like your medical needs.
Yeah, and that could really affect your process of going through your med board too, not having that diagnosis. And just remember, I hope you guys just glean something off of that, because if you're going through a med board right now and you don't have that, the Navy has to figure out what's wrong with you before they can kick you out. Don't let them kick you out until they figure it out.
And so with that, can we start a little bit about your history? Where did you start? Can you tell us about your, first off, who you are and what are you doing for our community now? And then we'll dive back a little bit into your history.
All right, I feel like I'm ready for this. I've practiced the elevator pitch so many times. I'm ready. All right. So hi, my name is Katherine Martinez. I'm a United States Navy veteran. I served just shy of 4 years as a sonar technician, got out as an E5 or a petty officer second class. I was a sonar technician on duty stations aboard the USS Winston S, Churchill, or DDG-81, and the Mid-Atlantic Regional Maintenance Center. I got out in October 29, 2019, just 4 years ago. And since then have been able to graduate with my associate's degree and my bachelor's degree, but also get involved with programs like Student Veterans of America, who really helped me find who I am as a leader, and then hone in on my skills more by getting involved with other organizations like the Mission Continues and the Travis Manion Foundation, which gave me that extra push to empower me to bring to the community what I wanted to focus on, whether it was donation and supply drives or bringing attention to mental health conditions, which I then got to exemplify more because while I was active duty, worked on suicide prevention a lot, thanks to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. But in present day, get to work with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So the person that I am today is a person that wears many hats, but at the forefront is I'm a person that leads with my heart on my sleeve, which is often misconceived as a weakness. I use that as a strength by leveraging my vulnerability, but also serving as a microphone to amplify the voices of others that may not have heard before, but also being willing to be vulnerable by sharing my own story to bring attention to the issues that impact our community that aren't spoken of enough, in my opinion.
Well, that was a beautiful elevator pitch.
Yeah, good job on that. So what was it that got you in the right mindset in transitioning?
I will tell you, it took me falling apart completely. And that's the reality of transition, especially when it's not your choice. I was medically separated due to an injury that occurred in the line of duty. I had a line of duty investigation that proved that I was not at fault of my injury, and then went through the med board process and was found unfit to continue service by the Navy. And, to be told by, an organization that you love that you can't continue serving. And then you go through that transition of what do you do next, and not really knowing, it does impact your mental health. It makes you question your identity and your sense of self. And even in your personal relationships, it impacts that as well, because when you're going through who are you as a person, who do you want to keep around you? And so my first year transition was not only dealing with the medical separation and trying to deal with the diagnoses given to me and how that impacted my quality of life. I got divorced within my first year of separation. And so I had a lot going at the same time. And I remember in the middle of pandemic, September 2020, I moved out on my own for the first time. And I got to my new apartment and kind of was like laying on the floor and was like, what do I do now? This is not anything like I had anticipated happening ever. And thankfully, around that time was when I just got to Old Dominion University. Since it was COVID, it was virtual, but I was a part of Student Veterans of America. And around that time had found out that I was going to go to Leadership Institute. And what this is, it's the program that Student Veterans of America provides to the top 1% of student veterans for them to learn about leadership and guided by mentors, but also put into cohorts with amongst your peers. And so it was integral to being part of that Leadership Institute because I was already dealing with a lot of emotions and not knowing who I was, to being given guidance by other veterans and service members and actually being told like, hey, I know it's hard right now, but you're not alone in this and we're going to help you navigate this. But not only did they provide me with that type of support and keeping me from social isolation, they were able to help me guide myself into who I want to become by giving me advice on my leadership identity. I'm a servant leader, and kind of what do I want to become? And I told myself I want to become the person that I needed when I was younger. So it really took falling apart for me to start being put back together. And that's kind of like the initial part of what started putting me back together, was being that broken down, but early on get that support that I needed and get told by people like, hey, it's going to be okay. We're by your side. We're here for you. And then here are some things. We're not going to tell you who you're going to be, but we're going to give you some guiding questions so you can answer that.
That's pretty darn amazing. It's pretty cool that you transitioned from the Navy and then you went through this whole entire process of med board and dealing with all your medical stuff while also fighting for the Navy to do you right. And that whole entire process is just like really like horrifying. I don't wish it on anyone. And that whole entire process helped you find your right mindset towards transition. So you're transitioning still in theory because you're still a student, right? So you're going to be graduating how soon?
So actually, I had signed up for a master's program at Syracuse University for applied data science but recently decided to drop the program. I am now studying for my LSAT. Based off my experience in my transition, I want to go to law school and become a medical lawyer to further assist those who have struggled or faced medical issues while serving.
That is pretty damn sick. I love that, man. That's wow. Good job. Good job. I love that. That's how you flip that whole entire narrative and you turn that darkness into something just wonderful. What was it that took you to get into that frame that helped you find your purpose and that helping other veterans and helping people around you? What was it that helped you find that purpose?
I just truly hated my experience. I couldn't imagine that I was kind of like left hung up to dry and given minimum resource, minimum information, not just about the transition process in of itself, but about my condition. I had no idea what a traumatic brain injury was. I had no idea how it was impacting my day-to-day life. I was just told like, hey, we're going to send you to med board with these 3 conditions. And I was like, I don't know what these are. So being frustrated and angry with how my process went, I really honed in on like, I don't want this to happen to anybody else. So if I can prevent that in any way, whether it's me being forthcoming and telling my story, that way others have that sense of experience of, oh my gosh, I need to be more prepared or start asking these questions, to having direct conversations with service members that have come to me. I've spoken to many to educate them on their rights and entitlements as service members and, you know, looking more into their insurance. What does it look like to get a second opinion, asking another provider? Or if you're completely in the dark and your Peblo's not talking to you or your doctor's not talking to you, the nurse isn't getting back to you, what does it mean to reach out to a member of Congress to do an inquest about what's going on and why they aren't responding to you and why you're not getting your answers?
So with that, for someone, so let's backtrack a little bit, right? And what is and how did you gain your TBI? And okay.
Did he freeze? I feel like there was
no. I didn't freeze.
Was there another question?
No. So I wanna hear your story about your TBI, and solely because this happens to a lot of people, and they don't even know what a TBI is. To be honest, I've had 3 TBIs in my career, and I only knew honestly with one of them and what the repercussions of one of them was recently. So if you can share with us what that is.
So I will give you the summarized version. Otherwise, this would be very, very long. In August 2017, I was on board my ship. I often did the color guard. I usually presented the colors at a variety of ceremonies, from burial at sea to chief pinning ceremony to retirements, funeral detail, etc. And so the commissioning officer of the Churchill was retiring. By the time he was retiring, he reached 3-star admiral status, so vice admiral. And so since he was the commissioning officer for the Churchill, wanted to have his retirement ceremony on board. So we provided the color guard and other details. And so the 48 hours prior to that day, I was exhausted. I was on duty. I was doubled up on watch. I had to stay on the ship late after working a full work day and had to be on board early and practicing and rehearsing, because nothing can go wrong for the Vice Admiral's retirement ceremony. And it's white season, so obviously you can't mess up your whites either in this process. So the day of the ceremony comes and we're briefed beforehand. They're like, hey, do a few run-throughs. But at the end of it, once you present the colors, you can go home. And since I was exhausted, that's all I heard was present the colors, go home. I'm excited. I was excited and honored to be at the ceremony anyways, because I love doing color guard. I'd done it my entire Navy career since A school up to being on sea duty, would still continue to do it on shore duty. But I was like, I can finally go home because on that day. It was on a Friday. Only a duty section had to be there, and the retirement personnel. So present the colors as normal. Everything goes fine. Everything goes great. We quickly debrief once we re-enter the ship to be like, hey, you guys did great. You guys can just take the rifles and the flags back, and then you guys are good to go. Like, you don't need to check back, and you guys can just go home. And so I carry my rifle down on a destroyer. You have to go back we were on the aft missile deck anyways, but we went back into the skid of the ship, and I had to go back and downstairs to reach the armory. And so I do not know what happened. I do not know if I just misstepped or I passed out. I don't know. I just remember I took like 2 steps down the ladder well. I had one hand on the railing and the rifle in my hand. And the next thing I knew, I woke up on the bottom of the ladder well, and my rifle was across the P-way, or hallway to those who don't know what a P-way is. And I just like look across, and I'm just like, oh man, like I felt like soreness. I don't know how long I was out for, but I remember just my rifle's there. They said I could go home. So I get up and grab my rifle to just tell myself I just got to go home. And the armory was a few steps away at that point. And so I bang on the door. My friend's in there. I know he's duty guns that day. And he opens the door and he goes, Martinez, don't freak out. You are bleeding a lot. And I had no idea. All I saw was rifle, bring it back, go home. And I was like, what do you mean I'm bleeding? And he's like, I can't show you, or I feel like you're going to freak out. And at this point, I feel like I'm just running off of adrenaline because I don't feel anything. I feel my heart racing, but I don't feel pain in my head at all. And we're both third classes at the time. And he's like, do I call away medical emergency? I was like, I don't know. The admiral's retiring. And so we're both like, I don't know what to do. So he doesn't call it. And I was just, there's no duty corpsman on board, but who was doing the color guard with me was a corpsman. And I tell him, hey, call back to berthing 6. HM3's back there. Like, I know he's back there because he just presented the colors with me. Just call him. And this part's kind of like funny to laugh at now. At the time, it wasn't funny. But he's like, tell Martinez I'm in my whites. Like, and I'm just kind of like, and he's like, she's bleeding. And I'm going to not say his name for privacy reasons. Tell her in my whites and I'll meet her upstairs. Just tell her to wait outside of medical and I'll meet her there. And so I have to go back up the ladder that I just fell off of. And for anyone who's been in a destroyer before, there's a little bench right outside of medical. So I'm just sitting on a bench, like closed door right there, just kind of like waiting. I can see when he would come up, but I'm just like, man. Looking back, it's funny. At the time, it's not, but I'll just like forever. So he finally makes his way up there, and he's like, I can't do stitches. There's no IDC on board. The best I can do is clean up and put a bandage on it. So so we get inside medical. He's like cleaning it, looking at it. Then he's like looking at me, and he's like, oh my gosh, your eyes are shaking a lot. I would learn that is called nystagmus. But at the time, I did not know that. And so he's like, we're going to wait 15 minutes before we can you can leave, because I need your eyes to settle down. And so it was still shaky, but not as shaky as it was. And I don't feel like my vision was impaired at the time, but I guess that's what was going on from an outside perspective. And so I was like, okay. He's like, I'm going to walk you up to the quarterdeck and then walk you off. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. So I make it back up to the quarterdeck. Bless the officer deck at the time. He's an ensign. He's new to the fleet and everything like that too. So he looks at me and he's like, oh my gosh, what happened? You didn't look like that when you came on board this morning. And he's starting to freak out. And he goes, do I call away medical emergency? And then HM3 is like, well, I already gave put the Band-Aid on her. She needs to go to the emergency room, though, because she's going to need stitches or something. And he's like, well, we can't use the duty van because we're still transporting people for the ceremony. And so at that point, I was told I had to drive myself to the ER. But I really didn't feel comfortable going to Naval Medical Center Portsmouth all the way from Naval Station Norfolk. So I chose to drive home at the time and then had my then spouse drive me to Naval Medical Center Portsmouth. But I get there. They did not think that my injury was severe enough because there was a Band-Aid on there, but I was not brought in right away. I was like, hey, there was no one in the waiting room, by the way. It was not packed by any means. I just sat in a chair for a really long time, also just waiting to get brought back. And in my medical record, I spent about 5 hours in the ER. And in that 5 hours, no MRI, no CT, no X-ray, even though I had a direct head injury. And that's kind of the background of what happened, because without those 3 exams, that was imperative to my care, and the delayed diagnosis really would play a role in my med board. But even then, the thing I remember the most is they didn't ask me a lot of questions really about what had happened, how I was feeling, but they were focused on the cosmetic appearance of my scar. So, I mean, on their part, you can't really tell I have a scar on my forehead. So they accomplished what they set out to do. But otherwise, the long-term impact of what had happened was something I wish would have been addressed sooner, or at least, hey, let's do an X-ray or MRI or something at that point. But that's the background of my injury. But I wouldn't know I would have a traumatic brain injury until I had to be sent up to med board in January 2019.
And so with that, right, you went through this whole process. When did you, as you mentioned, you figure out that you had a TBI? What happened after that?
So I would go through a limited duty status. I would start around March 2018. That's officially when I got off my ship and sent off to Marmac. And, I would see a neurologist. And for the longest time, again, we don't know what's wrong. There's no condition. There's no diagnosis that we're treating. We're just trying a lot of things. So I get sent to vocational rehab. And they're trying to get my sense of balance because it was thrown off. And it was called vestibular rehab, to be more specific. And they're like, hey, there's something wrong because everything that we're doing, it's not fixing, it's not improving. And it was my physical therapist who's like, you need to see an ortho spine specialist because I think there's something wrong with your neck. I think that's what's causing problems. And then I go see the ortho spine specialist, and he's like, you do have some neck problems. And I feel like this is what's causing all your other issues. And, this, by the time I see the ortho spine specialist is when my second limb due period starts. And I'm in the middle of that second limb due period. And he's like, you're going to need extensive physical therapy. And I don't think you have the time for it, but we're going to do what we can. But we're also going to start treating it with certain injections. And then I'm also going to tell your neurologist, that way we can come up with a plan to help you be better. And a couple months pass and I reach what's entitled to me, because in a limited duty status, you can only have 2 consecutive limb due periods before you're automatically referred to the medical board. So my referring doctor would be my neurologist, and we have a conversation. He's like, honestly, I don't know what to diagnose you with, but you're out of time. So I'm going to diagnose you with central type vertigo, cervical aphasia, and traumatic brain injury. I don't know what any of these words mean. I don't know what any of these diagnoses are, but he's like, I'm going to refer you to the medical board with these 3 conditions. And I go, okay, because I don't know what to say to that. I'm just kind of like, I finally have an answer of what's wrong with me, or at least I'm being told this is what's wrong with me. So I'm going to take it for what it is and say yes. And from there, my my med board would be activated. But from there, I really didn't get an understanding of what any of my conditions really were, because now I was just focusing on the med board process, doing the VA examinations, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't really get a true understanding of what a traumatic brain injury is and how it impacted my life until I got out and was starting to go back to school. As I was preparing to go out, I started to go to Tidewater Community College in August 2019. And, you know, my first semester passes. I get out October 2019. So like within that first semester, I'm struggling. I am a big nerd. I am now. I'm still a nerd, but I'm very much into books, love studying, love a lot of things. I love learning new things, but I'm struggling in school. I'm struggling to remember. I'm struggling to grasp things, and I'm getting frustrated. I was like, I've never had to do this before. You know, like I was one of those people that could read things a few times over and over and it sticks, it stays. And the veterans liaison at Tidewater Community College, her name was Shelley Bearden, bless her. She was like, hey, you know, there is a program in Virginia right now. Virginia Commonwealth University is conducting a study on the benefits of assistive technology for women veterans with traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury. You mentioned you have a TBI. Would you be interested in joining this study and participating in it? And I saw nothing to lose. I was just like, if anything, maybe I can gain something from this. I don't know what assistive technology is. I barely know what a traumatic brain injury is other than what it means. And so I said yes. So I got connected to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, and we had this discussion and was accepted into the study. And it was through that program. It was called Project Achieve. It would go on for 3 years and was introduced from a variety of assistive technology features, but also like the screening that they did, the questions they would ask at every check-in. I started to understand how my traumatic brain injury was impacting my everyday life. It wasn't just, oh, she forgot her keys, she's just forgetful. It's she really doesn't remember where she left her keys, and she can go probably days without finding it because even though it may be like right in front of her, her brain has blocked it out completely, so she can't see it. And so after that, I then went on to like, how do I remember things and how do I continue to, you know, have emotional regularity, and how do I improve not just my long-term memory, but my short-term memory? And this program is what taught me about my TBI. It is what told me like, hey, all these things that you're experiencing right now falls into the line of someone with a traumatic brain injury. And traumatic brain injury isn't just a blanket slate diagnosis. It is something that's on a spectrum. So some people experience traumatic brain injury with mild symptoms, some are more severe. And even knowing that helped me tremendously from being like, am I going crazy? Am I just like losing my mind? So it was afterwards and being part of Project Achieve that really helped me truly understand what was going on, and have since then been able to really find a passion for assistive technology, educating others on what it is and how it can help with a TBI based off my own personal experience.
Now, you talked about all of that, right? And then what kind of assistive technology have you used to help you cope with the TBI?
So a lot of people don't realize that assistive technology comes in various forms. Even glasses are considered assistive technology, from your blue lenses that help because blue light can impact and irritate your eyes, which can aggravate some of your symptoms, to even your cell phone from using GPS features or even apps for memory improvement like Elevate, or even those password remembering apps. I have an Android, and there's a feature on it where if you double tap the time, it'll bring up your calendar for the day. And for somebody who would be forgetful, to have everything obviously you have to program your calendar. So ensure that you get into practicing in mindfulness of intentionally putting your schedule in there and things you would like to do, like your daily tasks. So I'll put like my studying time in there. I would put to check my emails. I would put to remember to start certain things at a certain time, or remember to like, hey, take a cell phone break by having a timer set at a certain time. So it comes in a variety of ways and a variety of apps. And even for a tablet, which I was given from Project Achieve, there was an app called GoodNotes 5. I know they have GoodNotes 6 now, but GoodNotes 5 was absolutely amazing. It is an app you have to pay for, but you can transfer PowerPoints, textbooks, and you could highlight right over it, record certain things. So in this process, I learned I was a kinesthetic learner. So that means you have to be moving or doing something with movement in order to retain information. And having an app like GoodNotes 5 and having that capability to highlight, write, record, and even like transfer some of your notes, because this happens to everybody when you're writing on paper. You're writing your notes, you're like, oh, this would make more sense if I move this note over here. Just circle it and then click and drag to move it to the next page. So those are just a few of the assistive technology applications and tools that I've used that have benefited me greatly.
Yeah, I know going through the whole entire process of trying to figure out like how to focus on things again and how to do all that can be really hard. So good advice on the time blocking. That right there is like super powerful. Even I know relearning some things because I also am trying to get over my TBI that I had, and time blocking has actually really helped me purposefully filling out my calendar every single day. That's pretty awesome. What else, like during your process of having your med board, you talked about having your diagnosis. What else was it that helped you get through that process of doing your med board? What resources were you using?
So I will say at first, like I was just driven by frustration. I was like, there's no way that nobody has the answer to this. So when you go through TAPS, TGPS, whatever you want to call it, that class they make you take before you get out, give you a packet of papers. At least Navy, I can't attest to other branches because I do not know. But Navy, we got this packet. And they're like, you're either getting a job or you're going back to school. I already knew I was going back to school because I was in school. But for like a job, I was like, I don't know what I want to be. I don't know what I want to become. And I was a sonar technician. You know, I looked at underwater acoustic sound. I did the VMAT. I'm like checking, like, what can I actually do, like with sonar tech, like credentials, and like what would make sense and what makes sense in the civilian world. And I put down in that yellow packet, I was going to be a medical sonographer. So the very thing that, like, you know, the people who do MRIs and other types of exams, I wanted to be that person. I told myself, you know, since I'm a sonar tech and this translates directly, I'm going to be the very person that I needed, because I needed those exams when I got injured and didn't get them. That way there's more, at least, accessibility. If there's more people in the field, that means there's more accessibility. That was my mindset at the time. I now know better, but at that time, I was just like, if I can do this, you know, I can be a part of the solution of the problem I'm trying to solve. And, you know, I went to a few open houses at Centera, and I had open conversations with the instructors there. I ultimately did not go to Centera or pursue medical sonography, unfortunately, but they were very kind and open and honest. And that's how I really honed in more on the power of mentorship, because I had an extensive conversation by someone who was a medical sonographer, and they told me about their experience, their day-to-day life. And they're like, hey, if you want to work with like the echograms, like you have to be used to being in very quiet spaces for a very long time. If that makes you uncomfortable, this probably isn't the program for you. Or like I would talk to those who did MRIs, and they talked about their day-to-day, and their honesty and transparency helped me get into the mindset of, you know, like, what do I want to be? What do I want my everyday life to look like? Because I didn't even have a regular day-to-day schedule then. And that kind of helped me to start getting into that mindset. and then shifting over to, you know, when I was at Tidewater Community College, asking my professors questions. The veterans liaison connected me to Student Veterans of America, and she helped me go to my first national convention, January 2020, where there were student veterans from all over the country. There were people in different fields of study, from undergraduate to graduate's degrees. Some were becoming lawyers, some were PhD candidates. And they had their campus with nonprofits, government agencies, private organizations, companies like Boeing, Microsoft, Google, the Walt Disney Corporation, you know. And I'm just new to getting out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is accessible. I can walk up to their recruiters and ask them questions. I can ask other student veterans about their experience, what they're using. And so it was getting plugged in. It started with that initial, like, oh my gosh, this information's helpful. This is not to negate my mentors I had while active duty. They were great and amazing. But to shift the mindset from a military mentorship to civilian mentors was kind of drastic to me, because that type of mentorship was different, because they were trying to help you navigate your naval career and what promotion and all those other things look like. Civilian mentorship, it doesn't necessarily have to be career specific, but help guiding you and getting you into the right mindset, getting you surrounded by the right people, and teaching you how to network. And SVA really like set that off in a trajectory where, you know, I had friends in the Navy, I had friends all over, but now I have more friends all over the place with various fields of study that I can now bounce ideas off of and be like, does this sound right to you? Or does your school do this to you? Like, no, that's not right. You need to tell so-and-so that this is happening. And it was those things that were so imperative to my growth and success as I was getting out of the military.
It almost kind of looks like support groups just kind of organically happened as you were making your transition. But was there any deliberate go-to that you needed to find, that somebody guided you on? Like, who was your support? What was your support group that you actively? What was your support group if it wasn't just forced upon you just because of what had happened? You see what I'm saying?
Kind of. Based alone on what would happen, if I had stayed in the traditional mindset that I was in as a sailor, I don't know where I would be. You know, I might still be in a relationship I shouldn't have been in, to, you know, like being a medical stenographer. Nothing wrong with the career field, but I would have settled for something that I thought was right for me, because I was told your rate translates to this, so you should do this because that's what makes most sense. So you should keep doing what you know. But outside of that, Student Veterans of America was there for me. But a moment I remember specifically was that first national convention. Jared Lyon is the CEO and president, and everyone there's so many people who want to talk to him and speak to him. He does a really good job of making himself present at we call it NACON for short, but making himself available to talk to student veterans directly so that he has an understanding of what the current student veteran is experiencing. And I tell my veterans liaison at the time, I was like, I want to talk to him. And she said, go wait in line. Like, I want you to do that. So Shelly also very much pushed me to go into breakout sessions and join watch keynote sessions and network. She really pushed me to do that, which was also uncomfortable because by nature, I'm an introvert. You know, I stick to myself and stick to my own. But I wait in this line to speak to Jared, and it's going by, and I'm like kind of thinking to myself, I got in this line not knowing I'm gonna ask, not knowing what I'm gonna say. And I'm just a few people left ahead of me, and I was like, well, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna introduce myself. And, you know, I go up and I meet him and I go to shake his hand, and I'm like kind of fangirling a little bit because I didn't think I was going to meet a CEO, president of anything, you know, and he goes, hey, I'm Jared. And I go, I'm Katherine Martinez. And, you know, I'm saying it casually now, but I probably said it like so fast that it was not even a word. And he's like, what was your name again? And I say it slower this time. I know that the second time I said my name, he could hear it. And he asks me like, oh, were you going to school? Like, did you serve? And then I was like, yeah, I was in the Navy. And then he's like, oh, are you a veteran? And I paused because I was uncomfortable. Up until this point, I didn't say I was a veteran. I kind of was like, I felt like I didn't deserve to call myself a veteran because I was medically separated.
That is too commonplace of a thing. It is almost, it's too much stigma. Yeah, we've got this go do, all go, no quit, just go, figure it out, get back, and don't be all this time in sick bay, do anything. Nothing wrong, man. If you got to go get checked out, go get checked out. But for whatever reason, call sick bay commando, this, that, or the other. I'm not saying, spend, oh man, it's Monday, I got to go check in with the doc, nothing like that. But I've heard too many people get separated, talk, well, I'm not really a veteran. And for the life of me, 23 years in, dude, I'm still trying to figure out where that nonsense is coming from. And it seems like just a few years back, and how is that still alive and well? For one to believe that. What fuels that? What do you think fuels that? Where does that come from?
I think it's internalized pride, like I didn't get to fulfill my commitment. I swore to serve 4 years active, 4 years inactive, and to not be able to follow through was devastating to me. I thought I was going to serve a full 20. So that's where it came from for me. I know for others, it may stem from other places or come from other parts, that are external, but that's where it comes from for myself.
So when he asked you, did you say yes or no?
I said no. Like I said, it was like a dramatic pause as if we were having this conversation, that pause length. And I said no. And he goes, but you said you were in the Navy. Are you still serving? And I was like, no. And he's like, I don't understand. He's like, are you a reservist? And I was like, no.
Oh my goodness.
His follow-up question was no. And he goes like,
word of the day brought to you by no. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no. And he goes, are you outside of the Navy? Do you go to school full time? Like, do you work? And I said, yeah, I'm out. And he's like, but you're not a veteran. And I said, no, again. And he looked me in the eye and he goes, you are a veteran.
There we go.
And for me, I was just like, no, internally, I'm like, no, I'm not. But he's like, you are a veteran. You served, you did your time, and you are a veteran. And that's what I needed to hear.